Hey, kids, Florida's blowing up. In case you haven't paid attention at all, and we like to speak to the SEC crowd as well as the Tennessee crowd, Trevor Etienne has entered the transfer portal. He's the brother of former Clemson running back Travis Etienne, led the Gators in rushing touchdowns this season with 8. Second on the team with the rushing yards behind Montrell Johnson, who had 817. But he is not the only one. 14 players have entered the transfer portal since it opened. And we're talking about some key players as well. Boy, Florida could blow up here, and Florida could be on the verge of what Tennessee went through in their terrible, terrible decade. It would not surprise me at all because I never liked the Billy Napier hire. I hope you could back me on that, Caleb. I honestly can't remember if we started working together at that time or not. I never liked the hire. I thought it was a bad hire. I think it feels a lot like, without the sociopathic tendencies of a Butch Jones hire. I think Florida's on the downtrend. I think they should actually consider replacing Billy Napier like now. And I know now's a crazy time, and you could get yourself stuck in a Derek Dooley situation like when Lane Kiffin left suddenly. It was bad timing. But how much worse can you do with somebody else? Or, goodness gracious, I mean, throw a lot of cash down for Urban Meyer to come back. Just kidding. But I don't like the trend where Florida's going with Billy Napier, and I think that's good news for Tennessee and the rest of the SEC East. Or there won't be an East anymore. The rest of the SEC.
Are we sure that these transfers aren't transferring because of the recruiting class that Billy Napier is bringing in, and he's kind of making it very clear he's going to start all the freshmen and newcomers that transferred? Because they do have the number 6 ranked class right now, and it would be 3rd in the SEC next year.
Well, that's what I wanted to dig into. It sounds like to me that, and I spoke to someone with very, very close ties to Florida last night, and from his perspective, they've gone off the rails. That roster has gone off the rails, and they lost players. But does Billy Napier have some sort of mastermind idea? Possibly. But at this point,
those details, man.
You wouldn't, detail oriented. You wouldn't turn Etienne away, though, would you? You wouldn't tell him to cruise on.
I doubt it. No, you're right. The players that are hitting the portal makes it more alarming. Look, I think Florida. I said this a long time ago, and I'm going to take big picture here real quick. When you lose control of a program from a discipline perspective, it doesn't just hurt the coach running the program at the time. Dave, you know this because you covered recruiting for Tennessee. It hurts the reputation of the program long after that coach is gone. I mean, not just Fulmer with Tennessee, but then Lane Kiffin having a class that, like you said, had more felons than SEC starters at the end of it. That left a stain on Tennessee for a while too, and Tennessee couldn't recover on the trail. What Urban Meyer did at Florida took not caring about discipline to the most extreme levels we've ever seen in football. I mean, it was insane how little he cared. I think in the community of Florida, where they obviously get most of their talent, from Miami to Tallahassee and everybody in between, families and parents got the reputation, realized the reputation of Florida by that point was a school that's not going to discipline your kids, and your kids might get wrapped up in some really bad stuff if they go there. And I think there has been hesitancy on Florida kids to go to Florida because of Urban Meyer, and I think it still lasted a decade later. Notice Miami has a top 5 recruiting class, Dave. Did you see that? Florida State has a top 5 recruiting class. When has Miami, Florida State, and Florida all been in the top 6 in recruiting rankings? Usually one is left out, right? Of the 3?
Yeah, usually. And it's usually been Miami lately. I would say this too, though. Let me play off your point of the discipline issue with Meyer. That might have kickstarted it, but it's been the Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, Will Muschamp fiasco. I mean, you got to think, if you're 18 years old and you're looking at Florida, Urban Meyer was last the coach in 2010.
So you don't can steer you, though.
Well, I mean, but the parents, are they going to steer you to Florida 9 times out of 10? Usually you have to have a tie there. if you're a young man, what's the cooler program? Is it Florida State right now, or is it Florida? It's Florida. I mean, I'm sorry, it's Florida State. It's not Florida.
Yeah, but you're
So
going to
you
the
don't even
SEC
have
if
to
you go
go
to
as far
Florida.
back as 10 years. You don't have to go as far back as 10 years. You can just go back to the past few years. So yes, that might have kickstarted it with the way Urban Meyer ended it, but it's just been bad recently. And I think Tennessee went through that same thing with prospects and recruits a few years back. I think they're just now getting over that.
Well, this was the problem with the Dan Mullen hire too. Dan Mullen one of the reasons it was said he couldn't recruit, because I always found that a little weird, because the thing that threw me off, Dave, I remember the Spurrier years, you do too. You don't have to work that. Spurrier didn't really try to recruit in Florida and still won, because it wasn't that hard to recruit if you're a good coach schematically, because then you could just get guys in your backyard, right? You're in Florida. So threw me off that Dan Mullen had such trouble. And then I realized, I thought, you know what? Dan Mullen was tied to the Urban Meyer administration, or to the Urban Meyer coaching staff. And I think that again steered kids away more than they usually would be steered away from Florida. And so you're right. I think Billy Napier is I wonder where this is going, because Billy Napier, according to every source I've heard, particularly in Louisiana, I'm not high on the hire. He seems like a good guy. He seems like a nice guy. And I think players like him.
Nice guy.
You gotta be a little cutthroat. I agree. He's got like the Sam Pittman thing. I mean, because one of the things was I'm just going to tell you a story about Billy Napier that I'm going to give him some credit for real quick. When he was at Louisiana, he had a lot of offers after his third year there, and he turned down a lot of them because he's just a good guy, and he made a promise to the players that I'll stay there for 4 years. Okay, great, but being a good guy is not actually going to take you to the next level, and I think that's going to hold Florida back for a while. He's not cutthroat enough.
Portions of the program brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best in sports memorabilia. Go to facebook.com, Sports Treasures TN. Again, Sports Treasures TN. Before we get to Fred White, as far as the near future, let me just ask you this. What program should Alabama and Georgia be concerned about in the SEC? I guess it would be Texas. Are there any current SEC teams now with Florida, I believe, with a bad coach at the helm? Are there any other programs that you're really worried about if you're the preeminent programs like Georgia and Alabama?
No, because LSU just recruits Louisiana and nobody else really tries to go there anyway. I wouldn't be worried about Texas, honestly. Alabama and Georgia don't really go into Texas to get talent, and Texas talent, I like I said, is somewhat overrated if you look at it and how it pans out at the college level. So I think Alabama and Georgia are going to be fine with those. If anything, I would say maybe Auburn, because Hugh Freeze is a good coach, but I would never send my kid to play for Hugh Freeze.